Hello everyone and welcome to butterfly as a totem. As is always the case when there are numerous species of a particular creature, and there are approximately 20,000 different species of butterflies with more being discovered every day, I want to remind you that this video is going to be about butterfly in general as a totem. So if you have a particular butterfly that you resonate with, then there are going to be some more additional pieces of wisdom that are unique to that butterfly that would not be covered here. So for example, when we're talking about butterflies, color is a huge concern. So somebody who has a red butterfly as a totem is going to have a slightly different personality, slightly different challenges than somebody who has a green butterfly as a totem, because color is related to different aspects of ourselves, different challenges. Also, there's a very fine line between what constitutes a butterfly and what constitutes a moth, and sometimes these lines overlap. So while this video is actually going to cover a lot of the same information that will be in the video about moth that I am hoping to make in the very near future, if your critter is actually a moth and not a butterfly, and you may actually need to really do some research to determine whether or not that is the case, if that is the case, then the wisdom is going to be slightly different. So, as always, if you want my personal interpretation of your totem, then please go ahead and contact me to schedule a session. This is what I do, it's what I love, and it's very easy. You just go to my website and there will be details on how to do that at the end of this video. Now, this video was actually more challenging to make than most of my others, because the fact that a butterfly creates a chrysalis and emerges from it an entirely different creature than it was when it first went in plays a huge part in the way in which having butterfly as a totem affects a person. So not only do we have to talk about the personality characteristics and the life path challenges unique to a butterfly person, we also need to talk about the parts of your life during which you're a caterpillar as well. Because if butterfly is your totem, you're going to have the experience of both aspects at least once in your life. So I had to be really choosy about the info that made it into the video, because butterfly is such a wisdom-intense creature that if I put everything in, we would be in here for an hour. And I don't know about you guys, but I just don't have that kind of attention span. So let's start with the butterfly portion of your life, since I'm guessing that's what most of you are here to learn about. The caterpillar stage is really pretty awesome, but it's just not quite as sparkly. So we'll get to that later. So butterflies are actually ectothermic, like snakes. You wouldn't normally put those two in the same category. This means that they don't generate enough heat from their own metabolism to provide them with the energy that they need to function. We humans eat and, we're good to go, but butterflies need more than food. They need to absorb warmth from an external heat source, and they most often rely on basking in the sunshine to do this. So if a butterfly's temperature is too low, its metabolism doesn't work properly and it can't fly. And obviously it needs to fly to be able to move from flower to feed and eventually to find a mate. So on an emotional level, this need for an external heat source creates an incredible sensitivity in butterfly people to positive and negative energy from others, and from their environment in general. If the environment isn't warm enough for them emotionally, there's a very real problem. Basically, butterfly people have to be around positive, upbeat individuals, or at least people who genuinely want to get there to function properly. These guys thrive on joy, optimism, enthusiasm, while negative media, scenes of trauma, people in poor me mode, or those who really want to bring down other spirits are really going to flatten this kind of person. For this reason, butterfly people really have to be super choosy about the kind of people they allow into their lives, the kind of environments in which they place themselves, and the kind of media with which they feed their spirits. They're going to absorb whatever surrounds them. And so they have to make a conscious choice to place themselves in the company of things that nourish them. This is the difference between being able to attain their goals, being able to fly, and feeling exhausted, unmotivated, sick, or stuck. So butterflies also taste with their feet, of all things. And when we are talking about the metaphysical aspect of our lives that is associated with taste, we first got to talk about sheer enjoyment. Unless we've got a darned good reason to do otherwise, most of us would prefer to eat something that tastes good versus something that tastes bad. We want to enjoy what we are putting into our bodies. It is part of the fun. And it's part of the reason we're so addicted to Instagram photos of yummy food. Part of the fun is imagining what that stuff would taste like, even if we wouldn't actually let ourselves have it. So to really taste their lives, to really enjoy them, butterfly people cannot just kick up their feet and watch from afar. They have to jump in. They have to do. They have to get their feet wet, so to speak. These are not people who can live their lives as perpetual shut-ins or spend their lives in a constant state of meditation. They have to be out in the world, experiencing it. They have to ground themselves in it. You know those people who can spend their lives on their sofas watching Netflix and live entirely in a fantasy world, and for the most part, they're okay? That would kill a butterfly person. Stepping outside their door, engaging in activities that bring them pleasure is literally what feeds them. And they don't have to go far, and simply working in a backyard garden or walking a trail in a nearby park might be enough. But some kind of action, some kind of movement really has to be involved. Now, the second aspect of taste that comes into play here is the way in which taste tells us if something is good or bad for us. If we aren't first alerted by the smell, it's pretty easy to tell something has gone bad a few seconds after putting it into our mouths, at least hopefully for most of us. For female butterflies, the taste receptors on their feet are used to tell if a plant is not only the right kind of plant to feed their caterpillars, and usually the caterpillar can only eat one kind of plant, but this is also used to tell if the plant is healthy. And they check dozens and dozens of plants before deciding to lay their eggs on it. When we're talking about birthing something or creating eggs in an animal or an insect, we are talking about the creative process in humans usually. So to determine if they like something, if something is really suited for them, will feed their creativity. Most butterfly people actually have to try it, to stand in it, to experience it, and see whether or not it actually tastes good to them. Some people just automatically know what they're going to love, even if they have never tried it before. I'm usually this way. For the most part, there are very few things that I try that I wind up not liking. I just know from the second that I start being interested in it that it's going to be good for me, and it usually is. But I know a lot of other people who have tons and tons of things that interest them, tons. And so it isn't until they actually try one of these things that they can determine whether or not they like it, because they just have so many interests. And part of the reason for this has to do with the fact that we're talking about a creature that flies. And so that is therefore linked to air. In astrology, air signs are often the great overthinkers. They have so many ideas, and they're so afraid of making the wrong decision, because there are so many ideas, that they can talk themselves out of things that will serve them and in to things that won't. So they have to try something to know. They also sometimes find that an idea, the ins and outs of all these different ideas, are just so sparkly and so stimulating. They just love thinking about it. And again, it isn't until they actually try it physically that they know, because the idea itself is so cool. So for butterfly people to allow the greatest amount of creative expansion in their lives, the greatest amount of joy, they really need to give themselves permission to try everything that appeals to them, to take it out of just the realm of idea, to know whether or not it is actually going to be good for them. Now, because that butterfly is so picky about where it lays its eggs, when the butterfly person does decide what they want, they've tried it, they've gone, yes, this is for me, they're going to be extremely picky about the way in which they go about incorporating it into their lives. Everything's going to have to be perfect. All the elements are going to have to line up. Butterflies don't pick a plant just based on what kind of plant it is and its health. They also take into account the degree of sun or shade, the level of humidity, the height of the plant. I mean, if they lay the eggs too far down on the plant, a little bunny rabbit might hop through and eat that plant and therefore eat the eggs. So the whole enchilada has to be just right to suit those eggs, or it's not going to lay them at all. So butterfly people can be really obsessive about the hows and whys and ins and outs of those things that interest them. And this is actually to the good. They have an innate knowledge of how things are supposed to happen and what is going to best support the health of their creation. Now, they may not know this on a conscious level. They may not actually be consciously thinking, yes, this, and this, but they're going to feel very strong urges to do this or that, despite the relative degree of logic attached to each action. And this is going to drive a lot of people in their lives nuts. People who wish that they would maybe be a little more open-minded or a little more flexible or a little more logical. And if they can't do it their way, then they will often avoid doing it at all. In most cases, I encourage people to be as flexible and open-minded as possible, because this is how we allow the universe to present us with every possible thing that we could do to help ourselves. But with butterfly people, it's actually to their good to avoid as much as possible listening to helpful advice or suggestions from other people, and just stick with what feels good to them. They really do know best in most cases, even if they themselves are really baffled about their feelings. And if you're a butterfly person who recognizes that you have these strong feelings, but you've never really let yourselves honor them, now's the time. Start doing what you innately feel is right, no matter how crazy it looks. And those things that you've continuously started, not finished, or that fell apart on you, are going to be a thing of the past. Now, butterflies don't have noses like we do. They smell with their antennae. Animals use smell to find food, or especially in the case of butterflies who rely on pheromones to find a mate. For humans, what we're looking at here is finding those experiences in life that will nourish us. Finding love, finding the people necessary to help us bring our creative dreams to fruition, and doing so in an intuitive fashion rather than a logical one. Antennae are very much linked to our third eye, so using our intuition. Butterflies also don't chew their food. They don't have teeth to bite or chew. And chewing is actually related to mentally chewing things over, thinking things through. And so it essentially comes down to the way in which we make decisions. So butterfly people may be prone to overthinking, to endlessly chewing things over, but it doesn't serve them. The only way they really connect with what suits them is to trust their antenna, their intuition, gut sense, whatever it is you want to call it. This and only this is what's going to open them up to a life filled with color, with sweetness, with love, with the kind of amazing opportunities they never could have thought into being. These guys really have an incredible intuitive ability. They're usually quite psychic and known for having excellent hunches about things and people. Sometimes it's one or the other. Sometimes they may have poor judgment about people, but have excellent hunches about things. And they're usually very lucky. These are the guys who just magically find everything they need, even when the thing winds up being in the most ridiculously unlikely location. It's like somebody will say they want some random thing, and the butterfly person will just find it. It's really quite odd, but I've seen it happen a dozen times. It's very cool. Now, most butterflies drink flower nectar with tongues that function like a straw, though some will also drink the juices of rotting fruit, and some, which we are not going to talk about here, drink blood, tears, excrement, and liquefied dead animal matter. Yum! Speaking of things that taste and don't taste good. So for the sake of simplicity, we're going to stick with the nectar drinkers, because that represents the largest percentage of butterflies. And so what this means is that most butterflies subsist on sweetness. This is a bit like making sure they're in a warm enough environment because they require external warmth to function. Here again, we're looking at the kind of person who requires a constant diet of joy, light, color, fun, positivity. These are the optimists, the folks who really need to believe that the glass is always half full and always look on the bright side. They innately know that life is supposed to be sweet. The difference between a butterfly person who finds sweetness everywhere and one who encounters nothing but sorrow and falls apart, however, is most often a conscious choice made by the butterfly person. If they insist on putting themselves someplace where there just isn't any sweetness, working in a job that puts them in constant contact with the worst of humanity, for example, or remaining in a marriage with someone who makes a habit of intentionally raining on any joy that they might manage to cultivate, they're going to feel absolutely lost. And they're probably going to make themselves sick. Some people can be in these kinds of situations, dealing with trauma, for example, and still thrive. They can disconnect themselves enough, or some part of the situation is intriguing or stimulating for them, even though it is so inherently negative on so many levels. But butterfly people do their best when they turn off the news, ignore the negative Nellies, and focus on filling themselves with the things that make them feel joyful. Or, worst case scenario, when they cannot escape these things, they have to take a heck of a lot of time to step away from that stuff and re-immerse themselves in some kind of self-loving activity to help their systems come back into balance. When butterfly people make a habit of only allowing the joyful into their lives, they naturally become beacons of hope and light and faith for others. These are the people who uplift us, who inspire us. Think about how you feel when you see a butterfly. And most people describe feelings of hope and happiness. Butterflies make us marvel at the beauty of our world. They help us feel lighter and carefree and childlike. They inspire us to dance, to stop and smell the flowers. For those of us who've been unhappy, they remind us why we are alive. This is the gift of the butterfly person. Through nourishing themselves with sweetness, with those things and people that make them feel good, they become sources of sweetness for others. They don't even have to do anything. Just by being alive and by being their wild and colorful selves, they are serving as sources of light and healing. Now, there's one downside to naturally being a glass is half full sort of person, and this is when you are predisposed to look for the positive everywhere. Sometimes you insist on seeing it where it does not exist. Remember, butterflies have to physically land on a plant to taste it and know that it's good for them. They have to have the experience of interacting with it. So they are initially going to think that just about every plant out there just might be right for them. And when they land on it, they have to trust their senses to tell them whether this is true or not. Similarly, male butterflies think that just about everything is a female. Doesn't matter if it's a leaf, doesn't matter if it's a cranky bumblebee. If it looks even remotely like a female, they're going to sprinkle it with perfume and hope it gives them the go signal. So butterfly people really want to believe that everyone and everything can be a source of happy. And this is awesome because it's part of what makes them such incredible sources of light and joy. Where it becomes a problem is when they get up close and personal with it and their senses tell them that this person or thing is not good for them, and they ignore their senses because they want to believe that it is all okay. So to be a successful butterfly person, they have to learn to both recognize and let go of those things that just are not going to make them happy no matter how much light and glitter they throw at it, and to go after those things that will legitimately nurture them instead. Now, with all this emphasis on butterfly people need to be happy or they fall apart, you might assume that they're also super fragile, but that's not exactly true. These guys are lighter than a feather, and yet when we're talking about a migratory species, like the monarch, for example, they may be light, but they're still strong enough to fly thousands of miles. Butterfly people may seem vulnerable, and their environment is going to impact the heck out of them, but there is steel and determination in these people. They're not quitters. It is really, really rare for these guys to just go, oh well, I'm never going to get what I want, and just let the dream die. They have this compass inside them that is endlessly pointing them towards that dream, and no matter how tough life is, they are going to keep trying to find a way to get there. Most of us have seen butterflies with really tattered wings, or they're very damaged, like birds have gotten to them. And yet the wings are so large compared to their bodies that even with all the damage, they're still able to keep themselves aloft. So even when life is pulling them down, even when they're stuck due to their own limiting beliefs, the butterfly person is going to keep trying to reorient themselves so that they can fly. They're going to keep climbing. I have a good friend who went through this experience. She wanted something very badly, and she just kept going after it and going after it and going after it, and every time she failed in a horrible way and she felt awful. It was crushing. The reason she kept failing was her own limiting belief system. She didn't actually believe she was worthy of having it, though she wanted it. But she kept right on chasing that dream, unable to let it go because she had to know what it was like. Something in her said, this is a vital experience. You need to try this. Most other people would have quit, not her. Eventually, she was able to release the beliefs that were holding her back, and she got it. And in true butterfly fashion, not long after she had it, she realized it didn't suit her at all. So with her new love and confidence in herself, she found another dream, chased it down, and that one has been perfect for her. Now, lastly, before we talk about caterpillars and chrysalis and transformation and all that stuff, we've got to talk about the way in which a butterfly flies. There's a reason we say that it fluttered. Butterflies don't fly in a straight line. They go up, they go down, they rise and dip suddenly, randomly, and this is great because they're so brightly colored that birds have no trouble spotting them. So if they want to avoid the birds, they've got to be hard to catch. Most butterfly people are going to strike others as a little erratic and maybe a little wild, a little unpredictable. They might seem to change direction a lot or to constantly be interested in something new, or they may need to stop and smell every single flower, literally. And yet, they're usually headed in the right general direction. In essence, they're going to get where they need to go, but they aren't necessarily going to take the straight path to get there. This can be reflected in the way in which they pursue their dream, constantly shifting between focusing on one aspect of it, and then another aspect of it, and then another, or in something as prosaic as the way they grocery shop. It is generally not a good idea to try to do any kind of shopping with a butterfly person if you are on a tight schedule, because they're going to want to stop and look at everything, and including a bunch of stuff that was not on the list, and they are not going to understand exactly why this drives you bonkers. I went antiquing with a butterfly person once, and 6 hours later, they had a hoard of treasures, and I wanted to kill them because I was so tired of following them all over the place. Now, we're going to switch gears slightly and talk about one of the most important aspects of being a butterfly person, which is sometimes being a caterpillar person, or being a caterpillar person who engages in complete transformation of a facet of ourselves. Caterpillars literally liquefy inside that chrysalis. They turn into caterpillar soup, and then they reform into butterflies. Similarly, butterfly people are going to have the experience of going into a period of quiet or semi-quiet, dissolving certain aspects of the old self completely, and then coming out with a totally different attitude and way of being. Now, you may be one of those people who has one total spiritual awakening and your whole life is transformed. And if that's the case, can you sign me up to be you in my next life, please? Because that sounds really awesome. For most butterfly people, transformation is going to be a relatively frequent theme, and it's not going to occur with the life as a whole. It's going to occur with only one or two aspects of their lives at a time. So we're talking about the way in which they relate to their health, their relationships, their jobs, their creativity, etc., as well as the way in which they simply exist. So a butterfly person may have been wearing drab clothing their whole life, and then suddenly they embrace color. Or maybe they've been afraid of roller coasters forever, and suddenly they want to skydive. These are actually, they may not look like it, but these are very big, liberating changes that always mean becoming more vibrant, more joyful, more free, more truly them. Also, while they came into this lifetime to work with the theme of transformation, this doesn't necessarily mean they are going to get with the program. It is possible to resist transformation, but when you do, your life tends to break down in multiple places. So a butterfly person who is refusing to transform is probably going to have a lot of accidents and illnesses. Their relationships are going to suffer, and they're probably going to feel this sense that something's missing. And they'll probably keep trying to seek nourishment from the same set of activities over and over and over again, not understanding why these things aren't actually helping them or making them happy. Basically, they're aware that they have a dream that they want to pursue, and the universe is giving them feelings to guide them there, but they're refusing to work with those feelings, all the while still longing for that dream. So there's this conflict between I want and I can't let myself have, and that's what causes the bulk of the problems. So, assuming that you are going to get with the whole I transform and become increasingly awesome program, let's talk about what the caterpillar portion of your life is going to look and feel like. Also, this is not a linear process, guys. It would be really great if you always went caterpillar, butterfly, caterpillar, butterfly. That would be so nice. But the fact is, a lot of times you spend some time in the caterpillar stage, and then you spend some time in the butterfly stage, and you kind of go back and forth a little bit before complete transformation is achieved. So don't be surprised if you start going, yes, 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 I'm a caterpillar, and then why the heck am I having to work on this stuff again? What? So, again, not linear. Sorry. So, caterpillars are some of the most single-minded creatures that there are. They're here to do one thing and one thing only, eat. I love what this one source replied when somebody asked them if caterpillars could vocalize, could make noises to each other. They said they actually didn't know because the only sound a caterpillar has actually been observed making is the sound of chewing. Mommy butterfly lays her eggs on the caterpillar's favorite food, which, as I mentioned, the caterpillars can only eat one kind of food usually. And then the caterpillar literally eats everything in sight, literally. And if the caterpillar eats through the plant onto which it was born, it has to find an exact replacement or it's going to die. So as you're getting ready to transform a part of your life, you will try something or you'll discover something. And this is something that in your very marrow feels like the exact right thing for you. It is the key. It is the answer. This might be a new project or an entirely new way of being. It might be finally eating breakfast or learning to meditate or doing affirmations or training for a marathon or taking up needlepoint or committing to finally stop dating losers. You are going to wholeheartedly pursue this thing as though it is as vital for you as oxygen. You're going to obsess over it. And this is a really, really vital quality because there are probably going to be other people in your life that are going to try to steer you away from it or make you doubt yourself, or you will doubt yourself because we're human and we have these freaked out little things called egos. There are going to be times when, despite the fact that your heart and body have clearly said, dude, this is good for you, you're going to steer yourself away because it just seems so irrational. And then you're going to feel sick or empty or angry or otherwise unhappy. So you've really got to yield to your obsession here. It's necessary. This is a huge part of the caterpillar stage. You're going to think about it, write about it, dream about it, eat it, drink it, sleep it, journal it. Your whole life gets wrapped up in this thing, practically to the exclusion of all else. Now, when the caterpillar is 3,000 times heavier than when it first hatched, it finally stops eating. So at this stage, as a person, you have learned a lot. You've really become an authority on the matter, even if the subject matter is yourself. Sometimes the caterpillar part of the journey just means that we are our own obsession. Figuring out who we really are, what makes us really tick, why we do the things we do. And you've probably had a lot of little transformations along the way, releases, subtle belief changes, forgiveness, letting go of old versions of yourself as you outgrow them. This is like the caterpillar splitting its skin every time it outgrows it, which it does numerous times before the chrysalis stage. Now you're finally at the point where, at least where this aspect of your life is concerned, you've finally learned it all, or at least all that it is possible for you to learn. Then things stop. Suddenly they slow down. You let go of trying to learn or release or change. You accept that you are now in the place where you've done all you can do. And you're really ready to allow whatever it is that you want, whether this is complete self-love or a job that fulfills you or a happy romantic life or a healthy body or whatever, to come to you in the way that you really desire. You stop trying because there's nothing else to do, and you surrender. And you just trust that creation is coming because you know that it is, in the same way that a caterpillar's juvenile hormone levels drop when it reaches the end of its caterpillar stage, and its body just knows it's time to become a butterfly. It doesn't have to think, I wonder if I'm fat enough, have I eaten enough, am I ready? It's just instinctive, just like the need to eat itself silly was. So at this point, Mr. Caterpillar finds a nice place to hang out, its skin splits again, and the chrysalis is revealed. And during this time, that little guy is essentially digesting itself inside that casing, breaking itself down completely and reforming anew, like a second birth. If you split open a chrysalis, you're really going to get caterpillar juice. Kind of gross. So we can really equate this to a pregnancy. During that time, a woman knows she's pregnant, or at least we hope she does. And there's nothing she can do to force this process to happen faster if she wants to get it over with, or slow it down if she's not ready to be a mom. Short of inducing labor toward the end of a natural term, she just has to let nature take its course. Butterfly people are going to go through this kind of experience at least once in their lives, not necessarily having a baby, but they've done all the work on this thing they want, or this part they want to change. They know something is occurring, but they can't affect the process any further, nor can they change the speed at which it occurs. They just have to trust that stuff is happening below the surface of their consciousness, of which they are not mentally aware. This is not to say that they don't still worry about it. Again, it's that ego. It's no, 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 this can't actually be happening. But this knows when they're able to turn off the thinking portion of the brain. During this time, it is often the case that the butterfly person's life really seems to slow down a bit. Maybe they aren't as social and just crave time alone. Maybe they stop going out as much. Maybe their dietary needs change and they just find that they aren't that hungry, or they don't feel like moving around much. When this happens, it is really important that they listen to themselves and their bodies, because most of our really big shifts happen in stillness and silence. In my own case, and I'm actually going through this again myself right now, which is kind of why I recognize it. What's funny is I didn't realize it until I was writing the script for this video this morning. But in my own case, what often happens with me when I'm going through this kind of butterfly transformation is I suddenly lose the ability to focus on anything really intense for more than like 15 minutes at a time. I'm sitting here reading a script I wrote this morning, which actually took me all week to write because I had to do it in pieces. But if I had to do this from memory, about 15 minutes ago I would have clocked out. So basically, every 15 minutes I have to take a break. I have to just sit and be. I have to stare at the wall or zone out or do a recuperative yoga pose or take a break and read a book. This drives me bonkers, but I start to make mistakes, or I start to kind of zone off if I try to stay active for longer than my body and mind can handle. This is something that I often recognize as being part of the chrysalis phase for me. I'm having to continuously go into a place where I slow down and get quiet so that I can receive. So you may notice that happens with you. So when we do this, release and change can occur. With the caterpillar process, whatever is necessary for the individual to break open that chrysalis and emerge the changed creature that they work to become, it's probably going to happen in one of those quiet moments, and in the form of one of those incredible, inexplicably earth-shattering realizations that they can finally, completely, utterly let go of an old way of being because they simply don't need it anymore. I literally had this morning, and yes, it's epic. So this is so liberating that it's like a weight has come off their shoulders and they can fly. And off they go, fluttering from joy to joy until it's time to make some other change, and then the whole process starts over again. So I hope this is giving you guys a good understanding of butterfly. But again, if you'd like further information, you are welcome to schedule a session with me. I work with people all over the world to help them understand the unique messages of their animal totems and spirit guides, and also to help with physical and emotional healing, dream interpretation, figuring out what you're here to do with yourself, and about a bazillion other things. And it doesn't matter where you are. I use Skype and the phone, depending. And I would love to work with you. This is what I do for a living, and it really is awesome. So if you're interested in working with me, you can visit my website, which is www.ravenlightholistic.healing.com. And it'll tell you exactly what I do, what to expect, what I charge, how to book a session with me, and all that really good stuff. I'm also on Facebook at Raven Light Holistic Healing. I'm also on Instagram. With Facebook, please look for my business page and not my personal info, because I don't respond to requests on my personal page. And while I really understand that you might like my personal opinion or my professional opinion on your spiritual situation, I don't provide this outside of a formal session. So if you're interested in my opinion or guidance, please book a session with me. Have a gorgeous day, my darlings. Cheers.